We'll now call to order this virtual meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee. All participants are asked to keep microphones on mute, cameras off during staff presentations and committee discussions. Participants wishing to speak to an application during the public meeting portion of this meeting will be called on by name one at a time during the public meeting. At the time of the participant called on may unmute their microphone and turn on their camera if they wish to speak. If you wish to speak to or receive further notice regarding an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. Public participants will receive another sign-in opportunity when the public meeting portion of this meeting is called to order. I am John Wanless, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will now take attendance of our committee members and staff. Please raise your hand or declare your presence when I call your name. Bill Curry. Jacqueline Grimes.
Present.
Councillor Wendy Elford.
Present.
Bill Widmeyer.
Here.
Jack Anderson.
Present.
Councillor Jay Brennan.
Present.
Senior Planner Carl Grenke.
Present.
To review, committee members are asked to raise their hand when they wish to speak. Members participating by phone will be called on from time to time to speak to an application. Alternatively, please find an appropriate opportunity at any available time to notify the chair verbally if you wish to speak. Item number 2 on the agenda. Approval of agenda.
So moved.
Seconder, Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Item number 3, adoption of minutes. Planning Advisory Committee meeting, September 10th, 2020. Jay, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Item number 4, disclosure of monetary interests.
Chair,
Jacqueline.
I just want to declare a conflict of interest with the second application on Queen Street.
Okay. I'll give you time. I'll bring it up just before we go into that second one. We'll now open the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Please be advised you may leave this meeting at any time. Applicants, agents, and members of the public logged into Zoom to participate in this public meeting and asked to please keep their microphones on mute and cameras off until called on by the chair. If you wish to speak to an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. The purpose of this planning advisory meeting is to consider 2 consent applications we have in front of us. Consent application B20-03 to divide the lands known as 1719 Smith Falls Avenue along the shared building wall of the existing semi-detached dwelling. Application will result in 1 unit on individual properties. And consent application 20-04 to sever a 3.331.77 meter squared vacant parcel from a vacant property legally accessible from Jones Street for a lot addition to the rear of 153 Queen Street. This application is your opportunity to provide any feedback on these applications, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. We encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objections later in the process may be limited if a written or oral comment is not submitted. I will now pass the meeting over to our Senior Planner, Carl Grenke, to report on notification and summary of application B20-03 Following the presentation, staff will call on public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer the applicant in attendance an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Crawford, could you please tee up the PowerPoint presentation, please? Thank you. So we have two consent applications this evening. We'll start with the with 17 to 19 Smith Falls Avenue. Next slide, please. So as the committee can see, what's being proposed here is we have an existing semi-detached dwelling that sits on a single lot, and the applicant Paul Day proposes to divide the lot in two. So basically, creating a new lot line right down the shared wall of the semi. So each half of the semi would then be on its own separate lot. So the lots would be. It wouldn't be an exact half division of the lot. The north side would be a little bit larger and with a little bit more frontage than the south side. Next slide, please. So the area is it's an established residential area in the east end of Smith Falls. It's a fairly central in terms of access to commercial, industrial, open space uses. And the existing land uses, it's a variety of single detached as well as a number of semi-detached and some row house developments in that area. So this was part of the original Town of Smith Falls plan, but some of the lots have been divided in the past to create semi-detached along the lines of what's being proposed now. So the existing home is well configured to support land division, though right now we only have one sewer connection to the building. So if the development were to go ahead, then that would need to they would need to establish a parallel servicing connection. Next slide, please. So there's the property. It's fairly symmetrical right now, driveways on each side with the mature trees in the rear yard, and the shared lot line would be more or less right down the middle of that of the vestibule that divides each of the individual porches. Next slide, please. So there's just a sketch that was provided by the proponent showing the dwelling. Next slide, please. So there are some guiding policies that we need to consider when we're looking at a consent application. One is the broader provincial policy statement, and that's a little bit more high level than what it is that we're looking at here. It doesn't get into the nitty-gritty of lot creation, but it does generally support a variety of housing options and densities, especially on where existing services are available. Next slide, please. The town's official plan also speaks broadly to lot creation as well, and it contains some similar policies that we look at when considering applications such as this, and certainly we look at once again a wider range of density and development options that are compatible within the area, and of course create lots only where sufficient sewer and water is available. Next slide, please. So the zoning bylaw, that's the regulatory document that actually implements the broad provisions of the official plan. And the area, well, just about the entire area is zoned residential type 4 that allows low and medium density residential development, includes allowing semi-detached residences on separate lots like what's being proposed here. So the bylaw does stipulate minimum lot area of 315 square meters, minimum road frontage of 9 meters. So the retained lot meets these provisions. The severed lot does not. It's a little bit smaller than what would be required. So if the committee approves this variance, a survey would be required as a condition of the committee's approval, and that survey would confirm the exact lot size and lot frontages being created through this application. And if indeed it does confirm what the applicant suspects, then he would need to obtain a minor variance for to allow the reduced lot size and frontage, and this would come back to the committee, and that would be a condition of consent approval. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the public meeting, of course, is to hear from the public and hear from anybody who may have an interest in this application, and anyone who would like to make their thoughts known to the committee before the committee makes a decision. And certainly we've had some excellent discussions at public meetings that have been, and our hope is that sort of engagement would improve and would allow for a really good decision-making process here. Next slide, please. So prior to the public meeting, we've received some written feedback from some of our review agency partners. Public Works doesn't object to the application, but they advise the applicants responsible for establishing individual servicing connections. The Rideau Valley Conservation Authority is responding within the context of stormwater management. That's really their only area of interest in this area. They note that we don't have storm sewers here, and certainly encourage appropriate consideration of stormwater when there's future development. So this application here does not propose development, but if the lots were to be developed, then just have a look at it according to whatever the rules are of the day. Fire department doesn't object to the application. Next slide, please. So in summary, the application is simply seeking to create a new lot line right down the middle of an existing semi-detached. So it doesn't create housing stock in and of itself, but it does, and this was an important note on the application here, it does create home ownership opportunities, including potentially within the sort of the entry-level market here for new people looking to own a home within the town. So the application is consistent with provincial municipal planning policies that support intensification in areas that preserve existing character. So I'll note right now that the zoning bylaw does not allow for secondary units within the dwelling, but recent amendments to the Planning Act stipulate that we will have to start opening the door to that in the future. So we will be bringing forward zoning amendments later that would allow for accessory apartments within semi-detached. So once that comes into effect, and if this application is approved, then there is that potential for future intensification in the area, and of course that would need to meet the zoning rules of the day. So the applicant, of course, would be required to establish individual servicing connections. Next slide, please. With that in mind, it's the recommendation of staff that the planning committee supports this application subject to a variety of conditions. I'll just quickly go through those conditions. Most of them are pretty standard. Firstly, that a survey be provided and that we have those have copies of those surveys. The balance of any outstanding taxes be provided to the municipality. The applicant obtain a minor variance. The applicant completes the sewer and water connections. And also, this is an individual subdivision lot, so there is a little bit of a potential legal issue arising from the Planning Act principles of once a subdivision, always a subdivision. So if the committee supports this, we'll need to verify whether a deeming bylaw is required to be passed under Section 54 of the Planning Act, and that would effectively unsubdivision this lot, which would allow the creation. So that's basically a technical exercise that's approved directly by council. It's a fairly painless exercise in the grand scheme of things, but it is something that may be required. So if indeed it is, and we'll look into that, then that would be a condition of severance approval. So I'll pause here and pass the baton back to the chair.
Thank you, Carl. We'll begin by hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to the application, Carl will call on you by name, one at a time, to offer feedback.
So I'd call upon Louis Daglet to speak to the application. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Carl. Well, through the chair, we agree with everything that Carl has mentioned here with the proponents' redesigns being a great opportunity for an entry-level home ownership in the area. I know he's planning on pricing the units relatively under budget sort of deal, so it will open up the door for younger families looking to get into the home ownership market. They are quite large units as well. I believe they were 3-bedroom before his renovations, so I'm not sure if he's going 3 or 4 bedrooms. So it's a good size home for somebody starting out. The only concern that we originally had was regarding the property lines. The people who own the property prior to us, we had a number of disputes over where the property line lies, because as I'm sure you're aware, the surveys for this area are decades upon decades old, and there hasn't really been any new surveys done recently. But you've addressed that by requesting him to have a legal survey submitted to the town, so that I don't see that being an issue for us. I would like to say the work he has done is great for this area. It's going to increase a lot of our property values. As the property sat vacant for about 1.5 years, it was in pretty bad state of disrepair. So he's done fantastic work over there. I guess regarding the stormwater runoff, I don't see any concern with that here, as we're on a hill. So our runoff, as I'm sure you're aware, floods the Chambers Street underpass every few months. So that's pretty good there. And yeah, honestly, with him severing the 2 properties, it allows him the opportunity to sell off each side individually, which in my opinion is better than selling the whole house as a single unit for a higher value. But that would also end up resulting in more rentals, and we have a pretty bad history with the type of landlords who have owned those styles of buildings in the area. So I think severing it off into single family units is a much better way to go. I did have one comment regarding the frontage. If the committee has a concern with the one side not meeting the minimum requirement, Carl, I believe he's only 3 feet short.
Carl?
Mr. Chair, yes, that's roughly, I think it's even a little bit less according to the proposal there. He is just shy of what the zoning requires.
Okay, so through the chair with that, if that is a concern that the council or the committee would have a concern about, I would also be willing to negotiate with him on possibly severing off the additional footage he would need of my property, so he would meet the minimum requirement if that is a concern that would hold this up for him. But other than that, everyone I've spoken with seems to be in support. All the neighbors, nobody has any real concerns as long as property lines are surveyed and respected. We all fully support him. He's been doing fantastic work, and we couldn't be happier. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Did Paul Days check in at all?
I do not have a check-in from the applicant.
Okay, we'll skip B. I will now ask if there are any questions or comments from committee members. Jacqueline.
Here. So I read that Randy had no objection from the fire department for the application. Carl, did he inspect the property, or how did he make that determination?
Carl?
His comment on the application was strictly regarding the division of the land between the lots. So I do not expect that the fire department would have inspected the buildings. So there are renovations ongoing as well, and those are going through the permitting process, but they're sort of it's separate from the severance. The severance and the building renovations don't depend on each other in this case. He can proceed with renovating in accordance with the zoning bylaw without the severance. So the fire department would be checking is one of the signing authorities on a building permit application as well. But in this case, they're just commenting on the act of creating that additional lot.
Jacqueline?
Mr. Chair, I just bring it up because if the purpose of this is to create two legal entities, that middle center wall would need to obviously have the proper burn rating. But if that's going to be checked at a permit level, then it's good. Thank you.
I have seen older houses that when you get into the attic space, there's been no division wall in the attic. So if that's the case, he may have to construct one through the attic. The division wall has been down through the 2 stories and down in the basement.
Yeah.
Wendy?
I think Carl was going to make a comment on that, Mr. Chair, so I'll let him go first.
Carl?
I was just going to advise that the chief building official and I have been in regular contact about this property, and the CBO is very diligent in ensuring that the planning staff and building are sort of on the same page and know what's going on all of these fronts.
Wendy, did you have a question?
Not a question. I don't have any objection. There doesn't seem to be any reason to object to this going forward. I do think it's a good news story. Another addition to our housing stock, and provided that all the sewer and water lines are taken care of, there's been no objection from anyone else. I would also say that I would not likely have any objection to a minor variance for this either.
Jay?
Yeah, I concur. I mean, this is the first step, and the end result or the end game here is to increase intensification to get more opportunities for young families to have an opportunity for ownership. So, and I've just heard from a neighbor who is in full support, and I'm hearing that the neighborhood is in full support. So I think the property is improved, since Mr. Day is taking possession, and I support staff's recommendation.
Anyone else?
I don't have a problem with it at all. It seems fairly straightforward, and that sewer, that was a question that I had, but obviously that has to be taken care of. I thought it was interesting. I hadn't thought of the firewall in between, but how that stands now. Obviously the fire department, are in accord with that. So.
There was probably a firewall built there. Whether it comes up to code now or that remains to see, because it's 2 separate units.
Mm-hmm.
No more questions?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, that I'm sure Carl will leave this meeting and make sure that is flagged for both the building official and fire department.
Thank you.
John, I think Carl wants to speak.
Carl?
The chief building official is actually he's in the office next to mine. So if the committee likes, I can invite him into the meeting to respond directly if you like. Does the committee feel that's would be helpful here?
I don't think so, Carl.
Okay.
The committee is tasked with making a decision on the consent application. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion for consent on application B20-03. Jay?
Seconder.
Seconded by Bill. Now that motion should read, would it be subject to a minor variance in,
Oh, Mr. Chair, that would be one of the conditions of, that would be one of the conditions of the consent approval, that the variance be obtained for the lot frontage and lot size in the severed lot.
plus the other condition is a survey on it?
Yes, yes. I have a draft decision here. If the committee likes, I can read out those draft decision, the draft conditions.
Okay, Carl.
Just give me a second. I'm just going to, actually, I'll open it up on my other computer. It'll be quicker. So the draft conditions are the same as conveyed in the presentation. So the first condition, the acceptable reference plan of the severed and retained lands and the deed for the instrument containing the severed and retained lands be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. Condition 2, the one digital copy, 2 hard copies of the deposited reference plans be submitted. 3, the owner shall supply 1 digital, 2 hard copies of the deed or transfer documents. 4, the balance of any outstanding taxes, including penalties and interest, shall be paid to the town. We verify that at the time of completing the severance. Condition 5, the applicant shall obtain relief as required for the requirements for a semi-detached dwelling in the residential type 4 zone. So that's the minor variance, which would happen when we have the survey that actually confirms the lot size and frontage. And right now, what we have is an estimate given based on the property owner's best information, but that we will need the precise number. The committee will need the precise numbers to consider a minor variance. Condition 6, the applicant shall provide municipal sewer and water connections to the dwelling units on both the severed and retained lands. And condition 7, the applicant, if necessary, shall obtain council's approval of a deeming bylaw under section 50, subsection 4 of the Planning Act. If the committee would like, I can add just an additional condition about the appropriate upgrades as required to the structure under the Building Code Act, or we can leave that go through the process. So I'll take the committee's direction on that.
Wendy?
Does all that have to be in the motion, Carl? Does the motion that's on the floor currently have to be changed to include all those conditions, or can we just refer to it, the conditions under consent application B2003 as outlined by staff?
Yeah, I'd be comfortable with that. You are going to be signing, you're going to be signing the written decision that includes all of those conditions. So I think the motion that simply makes reference to those conditions would be sufficient.
Jay?
No, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Okay, that motion was made by Jay, seconded by Bill. All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process for the application B20-03. Any participants that have not signed in and required further notice regarding the application are asked to please reach out to Planning Coordinator Mary Remig by phone at the Town Hall. Appeal rights as prescribed by the Planning Act will be outlined on the notice of a decision. If you have any questions on this application or process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public meeting for application B20-03 for 17-19 Smith Falls Avenue. Okay, Jacqueline, if you want to go to the waiting room.
Thanks,
Well,
Dave.
Somebody say something? I will now pass the meeting over to Senior Planner Carl Grenke. to report on the notification summary for consent application B20-04. Following this presentation, staff will call on participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. I will also offer the applicants in attendance the opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Carl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dave, if you can tee up the next PowerPoint, thank you. So our second application this evening is a little bit different. It's not a new lot, but rather a lot addition. Next slide, please. So this affects a property on Queen Street. So what the application proposes to do is sever a small portion, roughly 332 square meters, or about a little under 4,000 square feet, as a lot addition to 153 Queen Street. So that 153 Queen Street is a lot that has a single detached dwelling on it and a large backyard. This large backyard is fenced in and actually occupies a portion of the property of the vacant property to the rear. They're all owned by the same person, but now 153 Queen is proposed to be sold. So they're looking to simply formalize that extended backyard as a condition of sale, and then that basically involves the lot line adjustment that through the consent process, what that's being applied to right now. So this application is not seeking to accommodate new development. It's not seeking any changes to the retained or the severed lands. It's just essentially looking to extend the backyard of 153 Queen. Next slide, please. So the lot that's being severed from is a large, entirely landlocked property, about maybe an acre and a half in size. It forms an effective buffer between the existing residential neighborhood and the rail line. So the application, as noted, is simply seeking to formalize what's already sort of been happening for quite some time. There is a shed on that severed parcel that's being used by 153 Queen, but it's on the other lot. It wasn't shown on the application sketch, but now that there's a lot line being drawn around the sketch, the applicant and the survey will need to confirm that shed complies with the zoning, the 1 meter that the zoning bylaw requires for an interior or rear lot line for an accessory structure. Next slide, please. So there's the site sketch provided by the applicant. Unfortunately, like many site sketches we see on here, we can't always the screen doesn't do it justice, but that sort of shows the context here. Next slide, please. So there are guiding policies that we look at through any consent application. Given what we're looking at here, it's pretty high level, but I will point to policy LU-2.7 in our official plan that discourages the division of land that results in lower density. So in this case, we have a low density neighborhood where a lot gets slightly lower density with the removal from the big parcel in addition to the new severed parcel. So maybe one thing that I considered in this application is, are we affecting or the developability of that retained lands? Are we removing some options from that in time? So that's one thing that I sort of considered through this application. Next slide, please. So the zoning, I'll just jump quickly into zoning here. The property is zoned R1. It's pretty simple in this case. There's no real, an existing lot that's larger than the minimum lot size would be larger. The retained lot already doesn't meet zoning in terms of not having public road frontage, and that's not changing as a result of this application. So there isn't really any impact on zoning resulting from this application. The bylaw does require that 1 meter setback from the shed to all new lot lines. That will of course need to be verified. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the public meeting, of course, is to present this proposal to the public and let anybody who has any issues, concerns, objections, or questions to make themselves known. And we don't have anybody signed in for this, but certainly if anyone's watching from home, we welcome you and welcome any feedback that you might have. Next slide, please. So what we've received so far from our partner agencies, Public Works has no objections, RBCA has no objections, and the fire department has no objections to the proposed lot line adjustment. Next slide, please. So in this case, the proposal really does seek to formalize the longstanding arrangement between two properties. So while we look at this application as resulting in potentially a slightly less flexible future development options, at the end of the day, this is not going to be. At the end of the day, the retained lot is not a lot that's easily developed. It's next to the rail line. It doesn't currently have frontage. There's a lot that would have to happen in order for development to occur there. It's on balance, we recognize the development constraints inherent on the retained land, challenge development, and that regularizing the backyard is in the greater public interest. So the committee can certainly decide how to balance those two items, but I think it's fair to say that no development or change of use is proposed and no negative impacts are resulted from this are expected from this application. Next slide, please. So with all that in mind, it's the recommendation to staff that the committee approves the application subject to the following conditions, and that's the survey, the deed, the balance of outstanding taxes, including penalties and interest, and also the applicant shall demonstrate that all structures on the severed parcel, so that's the shed, complies with the zoning bylaw. And if that isn't the case, so if the shed doesn't comply with the zoning bylaw, it'll either need to be removed, relocated, or the applicant obtain a minor variance. So the applicant has confirmed that they're hoping to keep the shed where it's at, so we'll just need to verify that the new lot line is in an appropriate spot, and I'm sure they can adjust it if need be. So that'll conclude my presentation, and I'll pass the meeting back to Chair Wanless.
Thanks, Carl. We will begin by hearing members of the public. All comments need to be addressed through the chair. If you've signed into a recording secretary and have requested to speak to the application, Carl will call on you by name one at a time to offer your feedback while we have no input. Item B. I will now open the floor to the applicant. So we don't have the applicant. Thank you. I will now ask if there are any questions or comments from committee members participating by phone. I will now ask if there are any questions or comments.
Jay has something.
Yes, Jay.
No, just to say I'm going to support staff's recommendation. It's a very a small piece here that they want to add on, and in terms of the shed, we'll look to, we'll see if it conforms to the zoning, but if the minor variance is required, then I would entertain that given or pending staff's recommendations. But yeah, I support their recommendations in this matter.
I would suggest that he owns that back property. He could make if it doesn't conform with the 1 meter setback, he could make it conform and adjust the severs part. Like
it's just a shed.
Yeah. Wendy?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. No, I'll support staff's recommendation. As Jay said, this is a fairly minor issue. I do have one question for you though, Carl. Is there any opportunity for infill of Jones if the road, the unopened road were opened? There are obviously, at least from the sketch, it would look like there could possibly be 2 or 3 lots there off Jones. Knowing that council likes infill and that we encourage it, is there any opportunity? Would there be any opportunity should the proponent decide to want to do that?
Carl?
Yes, there's a couple of things that would need to be looked at, and certainly if the proponent can obtain access off of Jones, either through acquiring a road allowance and getting the direct frontage there, or alternatively extending the road allowance into there, that would open up that possibility. I think any development at that location, the biggest constraint is the proximity with the rail line there, and we would need noise and vibration studies done to demonstrate that that's appropriate. But council did approve a zoning application across the road, Old Slies Road, earlier this summer, and the noise and vibration study had suggested that development could occur, but there's a number of some suggested mitigations that were proposed there. So it's certainly it's not out of the question that development could occur there. Obviously, that these details would need to be looked at in more detail, and that's why I was looking at are we potentially removing, if this was an easily developable lot, I might have a little bit more concern about essentially removing a portion of it and sort of reducing that flexibility we might have in the future. And there is always that risk, and certainly that's a very good question, Councillor Alford, and certainly one thing to keep in mind.
Thank you.
But I think if you look at the development process in the street, the developer would have to foot all the costs for putting sewer and water down the streets and all the services. And the size of the property they wouldn't look at it. The cost would be unreal.
I don't disagree with you, Mr. Wanless, but I never say never anymore. I think we've overcome a few nevers in the last 4 years.
Anyone else?
No.
The committee is tasked with making a decision on the consent application. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion for consent application B20-04. Wendy, seconded. Jack, all in favor? Carried. Planning process for application B20-04. Any participants that have not signed in or require further notice regarding the application are asked to please reach out to the planning coordinator, Mary Remick, by phone at the town hall. Appeal rights are prescribed by the Planning Act and will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our senior planner or planning coordinator. This concludes the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. We will now move to the next item on our agenda. Item number 6, priority issues. We have none. 7, we have correspondence items, none identified. 8, project updates, none identified. 9, next meeting, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, November 12th, 2020. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Jay, all in favor? Carried.
Just in regards to the first application. So Carl, if there wasn't a massive renovation happening on the property, for example, would it be wise then to add as part of a condition for the similar type scenario, if there wasn't a massive renovation, to have that checked out?
I would need to confer with my my colleague in the building department to confirm, well, firstly, what's required and what would be, if there, because I don't believe the consent itself I would need to check in with our chief building official just to verify if the consent itself creates any triggers on that. At the end of the day, we still have two separate lots, or not two separate lots. We have two separate units that would be required to be separated. But that's a good question. For my own edification, I'll follow up with Dave on that, and I'll
Just moving forward, if it happens again and it's just a straight up severance and there's no renovation happening, I think that's something we should be thinking about.
Excellent point, Jacqueline.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
This
Good night,
meeting's already
everyone.
been adjourned, so bye.
good night.